to dark work. That's what frontier life is. Yes, you think I don't know this. I think you deserve better than a failing ranch and a half-broken man. And I think you're feeling sorry for yourself when you should be planning. Her voice was firm but not unkind. Tomorrow we marry. The day after we assess what needs doing first. Fences, barn, house, we prioritize. We work, we survive, then we build. Thomas stared at her. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. You've been alone, so everything feels impossible. Now there's two of us. Two's always better than one. What if two isn't enough? Then we find help. Hire hands when we can afford it. Trade work with neighbors. Ask for advice from people who know more than we do. She leaned forward. Thomas in Sweden. My family had nothing. We survived on fish and potatoes and will. My father would say, Astrid, you're strong like the mountains. Mountains don't crumble when storms come. They stand. So I stand. That's what I know how to do. Something in her words pierced through the fog of grief and exhaustion Thomas had been living in. You really believe we can save this place? I believe we can try, and trying is better than waiting to fail. He wanted to kiss her. The urge came sudden and fierce, surprising him, not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she was hope incarnate, sitting in his broken kitchen, believing in possibilities he'd stopped seeing. But he couldn't, not yet, not when everything between them was so new and fragile. The bedroom, he said instead, standing. Let me show you where you'll sleep tonight. Astrid followed him through the small house. He'd cleaned the spare room last week in preparation for her arrival. Though cleaned was generous. He'd swept the floor and put fresh sheets on the narrow bed and opened the window to air out the mustiness. Now standing in the doorway with her, he saw how inadequate it was. The bed was too short for her height. The ceiling sloped low on one side where the roof needed repair. Water stains marked the wallpaper. A single small dresser stood against the wall. One drawer missing its pull. I know it's not much, he started. It's mine. Astrid moved past him into the space, touching the quilt on the bed with something like reverence. A room of my own, a bed, a window with a view. Thomas, do you know where I've been sleeping? He shook his head. Boarding houses where 6 women share one room. Church basement when I couldn't afford boarding houses. Barns twice when I couldn't afford either. A room of my own is luxury. She turned to face him, and in the lamplight she looked younger, vulnerable. Thank you for making this ready for me, for trying. Your feet will hang off the end of the bed, then I'll sleep diagonal. I'm used to adjusting. I'll build you a longer bed after the chair. After we fix the barn, after he stopped, realizing he was making lists of ways to care for her. This woman he'd known for 2 hours. After we're married, Astrid finished softly. After we're sure this is real and lasting. I understand, Thomas. You're protecting yourself. Protecting your heart. So am I. Is that what we're doing? Isn't it?
She sat on the bed and it creaked but held.
We're both afraid. You're afraid I'll leave like Catherine did, even though death isn't leaving. I'm afraid you'll wake up and realize you made a terrible mistake marrying a giant Swedish woman who breaks things and snores. You already told me you snore. I'm prepared. She smiled slightly. And I already know you grieve. We've shown each other our broken pieces. That's more honesty than most couples have on their wedding day. Thomas leaned against the doorframe, suddenly unwilling to leave her alone. What time do you usually wake? Dawn. Before dawn in summer. I like morning light, me too. Catherine hated it, wanted to sleep until the sun was fully up. We compromised, but I always missed those early hours. Then we'll watch sunrises together after we're married. After he agreed, the word hung between them heavy with promise and uncertainty. After the wedding, after the vows, after they stopped being strangers and became something else entirely. I should let you rest, Thomas said, though his feet didn't move. Big day tomorrow. The biggest. Astrid looked down at her hands, those strong, capable hands that had shaken his so firmly by the creek. Thomas, may I ask something personal? Of course. Tomorrow night after we're married, will you expect? She paused, searching for delicate words. Will you expect me to be a wife in every way? The question should have embarrassed him. Instead, it made his heart ache with tenderness. No, not until you're ready. Not until we both are. The vows make us legally married, but the rest that's built over time. Relief flooded her expression. Good, that's good. I'm not saying never, just not immediately. Is that acceptable? More than acceptable. Astrid, I'm not marrying you to get a woman in my bed. I'm marrying you because I think maybe two broken people can help each other become whole again. However long that takes, she stood and crossed to where he leaned in the doorway. This close, he had to tilt his head back slightly to meet her eyes. She was taller than him by several inches, and instead of feeling diminished, he felt matched, like they fit in ways that had nothing to do with physical size. In Sweden, we have another saying, Astrid said quietly. Love conquers all, but I think that's wrong. Love doesn't conquer, it endures. It survives. It finds a way. Is that what we're doing? The finding a way. I hope so, because I'm very tired of being alone, Thomas. And you seem tired of it too. I'm so tired. She reached up and touched his face again. That same gentle touch despite her strength. Then we'll rest together, not alone anymore. Yes, yes. Good night, Thomas. Thank you for saying yes by the creek. Thank you for being kind. Thank you for making me feel less like a mistake. You're not a mistake. You're a miracle. She smiled, sad and hopeful all at once. Ask me again in a month after you've lived with me and seen all the ways I'm difficult. Then we'll see if you still think miracle or if you think disaster. I'll think miracle. We'll see. Thomas forced himself to step back, to leave her alone, even though part of him wanted to stay and talk until sunrise. Sleep well, Astrid. Tomorrow changes everything. Tomorrow changes everything, she echoed. He closed her door gently and stood in the hallway, listening to the sounds of her moving around the small room. The creak of floorboards, the rustle of fabric as she changed, the soft thump of her boots being removed, ordinary sounds, domestic sounds, sounds his house hadn't held in 3 years. Thomas walked to his own room, Catherine's room, their room, the room he'd barely been able to sleep in since she died. Tonight it felt different, less like a shrine I do. And do you, Astrid Maria Henriksson, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do. Her voice was steady and clear, no hesitation. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife. Thomas, you may kiss your bride. Thomas had kissed one woman in his entire life. Catherine had been his first kiss, his only kiss, his last kiss until this moment. Now he stood before a stranger who was his wife, expected to seal their vows with intimacy they hadn't earned yet. Astrid seemed to understand his hesitation. She leaned down. She had to lean down because she was taller, and kissed him gently on the cheek, chastened and respectful. A promise of more when they were ready, but not a demand for it now. Thank you, she whispered against his ear. For choosing me, Mrs. Michaels cried. Pastor Michael signed the certificate with flourishes and wished them well. And just like that, Thomas Whitmore was a married man again. The ride home felt different. Astrid sat closer now, her shoulder touching his, legally his wife. Actually a stranger. Both things true at once. So she said as the ranch came into view, "What happens now?" Thomas looked at the sagging fences, the leaning barn, the house that needed so much work. Then he looked at the woman beside him, strong and capable and willing. "Now we get to work," he said. "Together." Astrid smiled and it transformed her entire face. Together? I like that word. 6 months later, the ranch looked different. New fences, straight barn, fresh paint on the house, 25 head of cattle instead of 15. A garden full of vegetables because Astrid had insisted. Chickens because Thomas had surprised her with them. A new chair at the table, sturdy and strong. A longer bed in what had become their shared room after the 3rd month. When fear had finally given way to trust, and trust had become something deeper, Thomas stood on the porch, watching Astrid work with a difficult calf. Her hands gentle despite their strength, her Swedish lullaby calming the frightened animal. She glanced up and caught him watching, smiled, that smile that still made his heart skip. She was nothing like Catherine, and that was exactly right, because Thomas didn't need a replacement. He'd needed a partner, a future, a reason to rebuild instead of just survive. "What are you thinking about?" Astrid called across the yard. "How lucky I am that you decided to bathe in my creek," she laughed. That full-throated laugh he'd learned to love. Best accident of my life. Mine too. and standing on his porch, watching his wife gentle a calf, while evening light painted everything gold, Thomas. Whitmore realized he was happy, not the same happy he'd been with Catherine, terrified. "I'm not changing my mind, Estrid. Are you? No, but I'm scared. Me too." "What if we're making a terrible mistake? Then we'll unmake it together, but I don't think we are." She squeezed his hands. "The pastor's house. We should leave soon." "Yes." Before I lose my courage completely, the wagon ride to town was quiet. Astrid sat beside him on the bench seat, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Thomas drove, hyper-aware of her presence beside him, the way she took up space without apology, the way the morning light caught gold in her hair. "Tell me something true," Astrid said suddenly, "something you haven't told anyone else." Thomas thought about deflecting, giving some safe answer, but today demanded honesty. "I'm terrified of forgetting Catherine's face. Sometimes I look at her photograph and can't remember if that's really how she looked or if I'm just remembering the photograph. It's like she's disappearing piece by piece and I can't stop it." Astrid was quiet for a long moment. "Then my father sold me before I came to America. He owed gambling debts and sold me to a man who wanted a strong wife to work his farm. I ran away the night before the wedding. That's why I came here, not just for opportunity, for freedom." Thomas felt rage and sorrow twist in his chest. "I'm sorry, don't be sorry. Be different from him. Be a man who chooses instead of owns. That's all I ask. I can do that. Then we'll be fine." The pastor's house was small and white, with a garden his wife tended. They'd known Thomas since he was a boy, had married him and Catherine 9 years ago, had buried Catherine 3 years later. Pastor Michaels opened the door with surprise, clear on his weathered face. "Thomas." "Whitmore wasn't expecting to see you this morning. I need you to marry me today." Now, if possible, the pastor's eyes moved to Astrid, standing beside him, taking in her height, her foreign features, the way she held herself with dignity despite obvious nerves. "And who is this lovely woman?" "Astrid Hendrickson, my mail-order bride. She arrived yesterday." Yesterday, Mrs. Michaels appeared behind her husband, curiosity bright in her eyes. "And you're already marrying?" "Yes, ma'am." Thomas met her gaze, steadily. "Circumstances require it. Will you witness for us?" The pastor and his wife exchanged a look that held an entire conversation. Finally, Pastor Michaels nodded. "Come in. Let me get my Bible." The ceremony was simple and quick. No flowers, except the ones in Astrid's hair. No guests except the pastor's wife, no music, just words spoken in a plain parlor with morning light streaming through simple windows. "Do you, Thomas James Whitmore, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Do have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Thomas looked at Astrid. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Her hands trembled slightly in his, and more like just a room. Maybe because tomorrow it would truly become his alone, not shared with a ghost. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, knowing sleep wouldn't come easy. His mind raced with everything that needed doing. The wedding in the morning, the work after, the slow, careful building of trust with a woman who was still essentially a stranger. But underneath the anxiety was something else. Something that felt almost like excitement, like possibility, like maybe the future wasn't just about surviving, but about actually living again. Through the thin walls, he heard Astrid moving in her room, then nothing, then so quiet he almost missed it, the sound of crying. Thomas sat up, torn. Should he go to her, leave her alone? Knock and ask if she was all right. Before he could decide, the crying stopped. He heard her voice, muffled but clear enough to make out words. She was praying in Swedish, the cadence familiar, even though he didn't understand the language. Catherine used to pray at bedtime too. The memory didn't hurt the way it usually did. Tonight, it felt like a connection across time. Two women different in every way, both seeking comfort in faith. Thomas lay back down and added his own prayer, simple and honest. God, I have no idea what I'm doing. Help me not to hurt her. Help me to be worthy of the trust she's placing in me. And if it's not too much to ask, help me to be happy again. Outside his window, stars filled the Montana sky. Somewhere in the house, Astrid was settling into sleep in a bed too short for her frame. Tomorrow, they'd stand before a pastor and promise forever. And Thomas Whitmore, widower and failed rancher, discovered he was actually looking forward to it. Morning arrived cold and clear. The kind of Montana dawn that hurt to look at because the sky was so blue it didn't seem real. Thomas woke before sunrise, nerves jangling in his stomach like coins in a tin cup. Today, he was getting married again to a woman he'd met yesterday, a woman currently sleeping in the room down the hall. He dressed in his only good suit, the one he'd worn to Catherine's funeral and hadn't touched since. It smelled like cedar and regret. His hands shook while buttoning the shirt. When he emerged from his room, Astrid was already in the kitchen, moving quietly in the pre-dawn darkness. She'd lit the stove and started coffee, the smell rich and welcoming. She wore the plain brown dress she'd mentioned, but she'd braided her hair with small wild flowers woven through the plaits. She looked like something from a fairy tale. "You're up early," Thomas said, his voice rough with sleep and anxiety. "Couldn't sleep much. Too nervous." She turned to face him, and he saw the same fear in her eyes that he felt in his chest. "Is it too late to change your mind? Is it too late for you to change yours?" I asked first. Thomas crossed the kitchen and took her hands. Those strong, capable hands that didn't shake, even though she was something beautiful. They just have to be brave enough to try. If you've stayed with us through Thomas and Astrid's entire journey, we are deeply grateful. This is the kind of love story that reminds us that second chances are real, that strength comes in unexpected forms, and that sometimes the person we need is nothing like the person we thought we wanted. If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another tale of hope, healing, and unexpected love. And we'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. Whether you're in Montana like Thomas and Astrid or halfway across the world, stories like these remind us that the longing for connection, for home, for someone who sees us completely, that's universal. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in love stories that feel real and earned. Until next time, may you find your own unexpected miracle.